Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 32 of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. So the Elric brothers continue their search for Mei Chang by way of her panda. I mean, on the one hand, they found a similar looking creature, but it's clearly not it. You know, it's probably Ed's poor drawing that's leading to all this confusion. I do find it interesting that Mei Chang is effectively hiding right under their noses as she's sort of gathering food and supplies for that little convoy of Scar, Yoki, Dr. Marco, and herself. I mean, at the same time, she is more or less kind of wanted, if only because of her interaction with Father and the other homunculi. Alright, so something about this interaction is not above board here. It seems like the voice actor is not a woman. I don't know, for a supposed old lady, the character does not sound especially much like an old lady. So the plot's thickening up rather nicely. You know, Scar and associates are just sort of wandering through the sewers, attempting to evade Amestrian forces, and by all accounts, they're doing reasonably well. I mean, Scar is fortunately in a position where if they do catch up, he's able to fight back effectively. I mean, like, for him to just be able to collapse a tunnel with his alchemy like that is a pretty potent way to get the security forces off his back. Unfortunately, the fact that they sighted him and survived seems to be enough to give Kimberly a data point in determining where they are going. You know, according to the map, they're heading to West City. Knowing Kimberly, I feel like he's gonna want to first toy with them, and two, sort of like prepared to head them off at the pass, such that, you know, he'll be waiting and prepared to apprehend them and kill them and do whatever other horrible things he so desires. You know, I'd imagine that given how many people know Kimberly, his release is going to cause quite a bit of a stir, considering he was presumably arrested for just killing a bunch of people. Granted, if they had known why he'd killed him, they'd probably execute him. Alright, so my suspicions were not unfounded. Kimberly realizes there's something up with that old woman too, but it's not his job, as he says, so what does he care? He's not going to say anything. I guess, in a sense, his laxity is a credit to the heroes. Here we go. The old woman is in fact General Grumman, and Mustang realized a bit too late to save his dignity. So, for a wily old guy like General Grumman, he is apparently a master of disguise in addition to his other many skills and talents. He's got a sense of humor to sort of laugh off this whole business, but if he's willing to go through something like this, this matter of disguising himself just to talk to Mustang, then, he's obviously taking things pretty darn seriously. So Grumman is making a bit of an astute observation here. Mustang has learned a lot, but everyone he can trust is now no longer able to help him. And even worse than that, Grumman was approached by that general Mustang had mistakenly trusted. Alright, so that's very interesting. Grumman, for refusing the offer of immortality, was transferred and then demoted. That's very interesting. So, obviously Grumman is trustworthy. And, maybe he's not petty, but I'm sure he has a bone to pick over being demoted for simply something, refusing an offer like that. Something that could reasonably be viewed as abomination. I can relate to Grumman a little bit. He's almost lamenting about how all this is starting to hit the fan before his retirement. If they just waited a little bit longer, he could retire and this whole thing wouldn't be his problem anymore. But Mustang seems to have an accurate picture of him in that even if that were the case, he couldn't sit by and do nothing. So this is a nice turn of events. Grumman, who had sort of resolved himself to his position, he's now fired up by all of the events going on, there's the opportunity for advancement here if they succeed, and, you know, if he nabs a little promotion along the way, all the better as far as he's concerned. So, despite receiving a promising lead, unfortunately, the Elric brothers are not finding any new information about alchemy. One would think perhaps Dr. Marco might be a good resource, but I do believe as far as they know, he is dead. You know, we know that's not the case, but... Alright, so this is interesting here. I seem to recall that the Major's loyalties aren't exactly clear yet. You know, it seemed like he might have been siding with the wrong side, as it were. But given that he's sort of running messages for Colonel Mustang, I think it's safe to say the Major is holding true to his morals, and even if it lands him in hot water, he's willing to resist the powers that be when the time comes. Alright. So now the plot is getting very, very thick. So here we go. We get introduced to the Major's sister, the Major General, up north in Briggs. Now she is a hard woman. I guess as is befitting, given that she garrisons the northernmost part of Amestris. I have to say, the whole deal at Briggs is one of my favorite, I guess you'd call it story arcs in Fullmetal Alchemist. I'm looking forward to it immensely. But I do find it interesting that given how dire everything is, that Armstrong, who had never really spoken of his sister, and, if I recall correctly, is kind of afraid of his sister, would sort of direct the Elric brothers to go get help from her, or otherwise rope her into things. You know, I almost have to wonder if she's sort of been stationed in Briggs to keep her out of the way because she's... well, I don't know, she's just, I can't even think of a good term for it. She is just so incredibly stern and cutthroat. Like, she's an authority unto herself, really, you know? So I feel like things are, getting a little bit tense. Selim Bradley has seen fit to start talking to Alphonse about what he's researching. And given that Selim is taking notice, this will likely attract the attention of Wrath. And I'd imagine Wrath will, take unwarranted interest in this, and probably not for the best. You know, Selim is asking some astute questions here, and they are questions with no good answers. You know, I feel like Alphonse could probably lie and say, like, it's just, you know, academic interest. And, you know, that might be well and true enough, but it's not the real answer. You know, it's probably for the best that Alphonse is, not really prying for too much information. Edward is being kind of guarded about where they're going to be going. Whether he's spying for his father or not, I feel like Selim would pass on any information he hears, and that would work to the detriment of the Elric brothers. I feel like he's pushing buttons deliberately. Of course, this is probably the natural response. Oh, they didn't even realize. They didn't realize the kid they were talking to was Selim Bradley until the Secret Service pulled out their guns. Man, I'd imagine they would have been a lot more guarded had they realized. So I guess whether they want to or not, they are now house guests. Oh dear. I mean, surely neither Selim nor Rath's wife are really involved in any of this stuff. But at the same time, the threat of Rath dropping by for a quick visit is ever present and unwanted, if I'm being honest. I'd imagine Ed and Al would be rather tense. It strikes me as a bit uncouth of Ed to sort of start prying questions like this. Selim might not think anything of it, but his mother certainly would, I feel, and, even if neither of them really think about it too much, if they were to bring it up to Bradley, he would surely understand that the Elric brothers are treading on some interesting ground, and they might need a little reminder to stay in their place. So I find it interesting, that little story about their first date and all that, and how she slapped him. He was presumably already Wrath at this point, so maybe he was like, ooh, a woman who is willing to slap me is good enough, I guess. Or maybe he was just doing it under orders. Hard to tell. But given how we know what Wrath is really like, the way he's putting up this false front is rather disconcerting. Man, it's just the casual way he refutes what they're saying, oh, I just saw you at Central Command, oh ho ho. As if to remind them that, hey, I've got you under my thumb, you better watch it. Alright, so Wrath is dropping a little hint of truth here. Selim is adopted. He's not our biological child. And the hidden implication there, from Wrath at least, is that, he's not my son. You have no leverage over me. And, man, that's just a wicked thing to say. Man, the Elric brothers, I can't help but sympathize with them for having to stutter and make a bunch of answers up. Man, everything Wrath says, although it's, reasonable on the surface, they're all just veiled threats, saying, even a person like me has a family, you guys have family too, don't forget that. And I don't care if you kill mine. You care if I kill yours, so watch it. Man, that is a really tense situation. And I guess if that were tense for the Elric brothers, I'd imagine Hawkeye's in a pretty tense situation too. She has to tend to this guy basically during all business hours and probably a fair bit beyond that. Whether or not she knows he's a homunculus, she certainly knows that he is up to no good. I do find it telling that Alphonse's sort of first reaction after all this is one of pity. He pities Mrs. Bradley and Salim because they don't know everything that's going on. And I think that is his first response, is something that speaks to his good nature. So once again, it seems like Scar and company have given Kimberly's men the slip. So, even if they are progressing inexorably towards West City, they're much more cunning than Kimberly gave them credit for. But of course, it would seem as though maybe they're not actually headed towards West City, and they were just sort of hoping to find a convenient place to change course and cover their tracks. It seems like at this point, Kimberly's really running off basically a coin flip here. Would they have gone north or south? And I think it's reasonable to assume, just for convenient plot purposes, that everybody's sort of converging together. In this case, to the north. Now, I'd imagine, given that the Elric brothers are heading north, they're going to be met by a new set of problems. Given that they're from central and kind of like southeast, they're not going to be used to the horrible climate and the cold weather and all that. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.